What's up, guys? So UFC 249 just wrapped up, and man, a lot to go over. And let's start with that main event. So Justin Gaethje defeats Tony Ferguson by 5th round TKO, 3 minutes and 39 seconds of the round. It was just an amazing performance from Justin Gaethje from the 3rd round on, right? The first 2 rounds were competitive, Gaethje doing damage, Tony Ferguson landing some of his good strikes. But eventually, man, Tony's defense, it caught up to him. He's had such a very unorthodox defensive style. He's gotten dropped before because of it. He's gotten caught before because of it. But this time, Gaethje kept it simple. He stuck to the basics, used really good movement, and just picked at Tony Ferguson whenever he saw an opening. I mean, it even came to a point where he was throwing naked right straights from a distance, even having a big reach disadvantage. Tony just didn't react to them. He just kept getting hit. I don't buy the notion. I see some people talking about that Tony Ferguson's old now, and maybe his reactions have slowed down, but I don't really think so. It's hard to ever know for sure, but I don't think that's what's going on here. Tony's always had a very weird defensive style, and he just makes it work usually, but this time he just couldn't. He would evade some of the initial strikes, but the follow-up punches were really getting to him. He would turn away from punches and try to move away, but Gaethje chases him down quicker. Lands like a left hook after Tony evades his right straight or something like that. The leg kicks from the 4th round and the 5th round really destroyed Tony Ferguson's movement, and they were just hurting him badly. Also, he was getting his kicks checked when he would throw them. Justin Gaethje is an amazing leg kicker. He's amazing at throwing them and defending them, right? Which puts him as one of the best leg kickers in the sport. And I love the way Justin Gaethje is fighting now. He used to be that marauding, war-hungry brawler back in the day, but I'm glad he's sticking to a more methodical and patient style, and it's really helping him. Not only is he able to defeat someone like Tony Ferguson, someone as great as him, by doing this, but also he's able to last 5 rounds easily at a high-paced fight. Before, when he was going to war with people, he would gas out like 2 rounds in, just throwing everything he had in those 2 rounds, and 5 rounds with Tony Ferguson, and he didn't look like he was slowing down at all. He's the first, not only is he the first to do that, but he's the first guy to finish Tony Ferguson in the UFC, and the second guy to ever defeat him after how long since Tony Ferguson's first loss. And this snaps the 12-win streak of Tony Ferguson. In a way, it is a bit depressing to see Tony Ferguson get beat up the way he did. I mean, he's the guy that cuts up and batters his opponents and has like this whole list of opponents that just left the arena way worse than they came in. But Gaethje did that same thing to Tony Ferguson. Same thing. Tony was really beat up, cut up by the punches, bruised up, and he was getting rocked so often. It came to a point where his chin couldn't even take a jab that well. Right in that 5th round, Gaethje just lands a very quick jab, and you see Tony, he's too tough, man. He's too tough for his own good. He gets hit by the jab, and he's visibly hurt. But you can see him trying to shake it off and move away, and he's trying to get back into the fight. He had the will to keep going, but Herb Dean made the right decision and stopped that fight right from there. Not just that jab, but his chin in general was insane. This guy ate almost everything Justin Gaethje had. And Gaethje's a powerhouse. Some of those punches were landing flush, and Gaethje was just swinging at his head. Tony just stood from all of it. He withstood. Yes, hurt and concussed, but his will to fight and his mentality are just unbreakable. Like, when they talked about that Tony Ferguson and Justin Gaethje have this unbreakable will, they're not lying at all, man. But, like I said before, Justin Gaethje has to fight Khabib. 100%, that's the fight. It's very sad. It hurts to say that Tony shouldn't fight Khabib at this point. Tony needs to get back into this. I hope he takes a lot of time off, right? Because he said he was on a training camp since November, which is a very long time, a very long training camp, a lot of training, and he said he sparred, and then getting into a 5-round war where he just gets hurt more than ever before to the point where his chin was hit to the brink. He should take a lot of time off. I don't want to really see him until like the end of the year at least. And that leaves for Justin Gaethje to fight Khabib whenever Khabib is ready to fight. Because Gaethje, yeah, he took some damage, he got dropped in the fight, but he should be back probably like late summer, early fall. And let's be honest, man, Gaethje's a hard fight for Khabib. He has amazing wrestling, great takedown defense, and striking-wise, he beats Khabib almost everywhere. Khabib has good striking defense. He's really good at moving his head away from punches. Is he better than Tony Ferguson? He's a lot more fundamentally sound than Tony. Tony does things that you don't learn. Only he knows how to do what he does. So it's really hard to tell who is better technically when it comes to striking defense. But statistically, Tony Ferguson, before this fight, had one of the highest strike and defensive rates in the UFC. Khabib has a higher strike and defensive rate, and he's fought guys like Conor McGregor and Dustin Poirier. So it's going to be really interesting to see if Justin Gaethje can actually hit Khabib the way he hit Tony Ferguson, especially with Khabib constantly going at the hips and going at the legs. And how does Gaethje's wrestling cardio work in MMA? Because he said before, the reason why he doesn't want to wrestle too much is because he kind of gasses out when he wrestles. He said his wrestling cardio is not as good. He explodes a bit too much. He uses a lot of energy when he wrestles, and that could potentially hurt him against a guy like Khabib as well. If it gets to the ground, how is he going to scramble and exchange with Khabib? Very interesting fight. I still think Tony is the hardest fight for Khabib, right? Because Khabib is not going to be able to strike with Tony, right? Absolutely not. And Tony can grapple with anybody. But I will say Gaethje, of course, has a very hard style. We'll see, man. I hope it happens. He should not be denied. Justin Gaethje deserves to unify the belt. And then for Tony Ferguson, who should he fight? Looking at the rankings, it would make perfect sense for him to fight Conor McGregor at the end of the year. I just don't think that's going to happen. I think Conor's going to fight way sooner than the end of the year. Now, it all depends what happens with Conor's fight. If he wins his fight, he's not fighting Tony Ferguson. He's going to get the next title shot. If he loses that fight, yes, then Tony Ferguson versus Conor McGregor makes perfect sense. Now, let's throw Conor out of there. Who else is there for Tony Ferguson? Dustin Poirier? Dustin Poirier would be a good fight. That's the only guy that makes sense. Tony's beaten pretty much everybody else. So, Poirier if Conor's not available. Conor if he loses his next fight. And then we go to the co-main event. Henry Cejudo defeats Dominick Cruz by TKO in the second round, 4 minutes and 58 seconds. This was a pretty interesting fight, where Cruz was extremely defensive, just moving a lot, not countering. When he attacked, he was trying to take the initiative, but Henry Cejudo was just chopping those legs, man. Just like TJ Dillashaw showed the world, just chop those legs. It makes his movement a lot easier to track, and eventually, Cejudo caught him with the knee. What Cruz was doing a lot was he was ducking his head after he was throwing punches, especially when he was backed up to the cage. And that was a consistency throughout the fight and allowed Cejudo to gauge the distance and gauge when Cruz is going to duck his head, right? When he's ducking his head, he's either trying to throw these windmill punches or he's trying to bump into Henry Cejudo and then create separation after. So eventually what happened was Dominick Cruz actually showed his uppercut 4 times. He showed him the uppercut 4 times before he went for it. And when he went for it, Cejudo got the distance down and just threw up the knee. Looked 100% like he calculated it, and that was pretty much the end of it, but there was the ground and pound shots that a lot of people say was an early stoppage. I don't necessarily think so. I understand he was standing up, but he's still not stopping the punches. Look, Tony Ferguson just got to finish on his feet. You know what I'm saying? So, does it matter if they're standing up, but they're not stopping the punches from hitting their head? You know what I'm saying? There were 12 unanswered shots after the knee, and not once did Cruz defend them. Never did he even pick his hands up to defend them. He was just trying to stand up. And we remember back in the day, Cain Velasquez defeated Ben Rothwell for the exact same reason. But that was even crazier because Ben Rothwell actually got up to his feet before the ref came in there. So I don't think just because he's standing up, it's enough to say that it was an early stoppage. He got dropped badly, hurt badly, and a lot of unanswered blows. It took him a while to start standing up too, which means absolutely concussed, right? So I think it was a fine stoppage. And it just shows, man, Henry Cejudo, he's one of the greats. He's an amazing fighter. Won and defended both of his belts. He's an Olympic champion. He has an amazing streak of wins right now with Demetrius Johnson, TJ Dillashaw, Marlon Moraes, and now Dominick Cruz. TKO'd or KO'd 3 of them. That's a resume. That's a resume right there. And he retired. He retired on top, just like GSP did, just like very, very few fighters have ever done. I don't know if he's going to commit with it, because you know how fighters are sometimes. They say they want to retire after a fight, but then they just realize they were just emotional and they still have the drive, so they want to get back in there. Or they see another goal. Henry Cejudo defeating Dominick Cruz might tell him, who's next. He just wants to chase legacy right here. He wants to just chase achievements and goals. He was talking about Volkanovski, though. Why was he talking about Volkanovski so much? And then he's just going to retire after. He's not going to go up for a 3rd belt. That is something nobody has ever done before. That alone tells me maybe he'll come back. Maybe he'll come back and go and fight Alexander Volkanovski. Who knows? We'll see. But if he still fights, let's say he's still going to fight, he has to fight the number 1 contender. Whoever it's going to be, Aljamain Sterling, Petr Yan, it depends who has the most impressive finish, most impressive performance. And as for Dominick Cruz, I like to see him fight whoever doesn't get the title shot next. So if Aljamain Sterling doesn't get the title shot, and Petryan does or something like that, we'll do Dominick Cruz versus Aljamain Sterling and then vice versa. Personally, I would love to see him fight Sterling more. Right, the grappling would be very interesting. The long range striking, all that combined, it would be a very interesting fight. And then we go to Francis Ngannou defeating Jairzinho Rozenstruik by KO 20 seconds in the first round. Fastest finish of his career, in the UFC at least. Including this fight, I think his last 4 wins don't even reach a round, a single 5-minute round. You're gonna tell me Francis Ngannou could have defeated Curtis Blades, Cain Velasquez, Junior Dos Santos, and Jairzinho Rozenstruik all back to back in one night? Imagine that. This guy is a freak of nature. The most powerful, the most durable guy I've ever seen. He got countered twice coming in, shook it off like nothing, and just landed one big hammer, and Rozenstruik was asleep. And Rozenstruik has a granite chin. I mean, we're talking about a guy who walked through Overeem strikes like they were nothing. And he gets slept by one punch from Ngannou. Ngannou did in 20 seconds what Overeem couldn't even do in 5 rounds. That's the power difference between Ngannou and everybody else, essentially. Now, I will say this. Even though, it's a good win. It's a great win. He defeated an undefeated fighter, a long-time pro kickboxer, did it in 20 seconds. The way he went out there and fought. If he went out there and fought DC or Stipe like that, I do not see him win. Rushing an opponent like that, he's going to get taken down when he fights guys like those, fights good wrestlers. So hopefully, if he goes and fights Stipe, for his sake, he doesn't do that sort of thing again, because he did that to Stipe before, where he just rushed him. And Stipe showed amazing head movement and great takedowns to counter Francis and eventually get him tired. Here, he probably knew that Rozenstruik wasn't going to go for a takedown. So he probably knew, if I rush this guy, he's going to stand there with me. And boy, did that not work out. I'm pretty sure Rozenstruik knew that Francis was going to rush him eventually, but he probably thought that his counter-punching, because he's knocked out so many opponents countering going backwards, he probably thought he could knock out Francis as well. But when you punch a guy in the jaw and punch him behind the ear and he just walks through it, that might be the scariest thing of all time. You hit this guy with punches you've knocked out opponents with in the past, and they just eat all of it and walk forward. But unfortunately for Rozenstruik, he probably found out too late. Once he noticed Ngannou walked through his punches, the fight was over. And it just comes down to Ngannou has to fight the champion. He has to fight Stipe, 100%. If Stipe doesn't come back because of, whatever's going on with him, being a firefighter, he can't train, all that stuff he talked about. If he's gone for over a year since his last fight with DC, which was last year, Ngannou should be given the interim championship. At least. He doesn't have to fight for it. Just give it to him. Who does he have to fight now? He beat everybody pretty much, except DC, and I'm pretty sure DC said he'll only fight Stipe. And as for Rozenstruik, he should take some time off, but when he comes back, if Walt Harris defeats Alistair Overeem on Saturday, that fight should probably get booked later on this year. If not that, a fight with Alexey Oleynik would be a good one. And then we go to Kelvin Kattar defeating Jeremy Stephens by TKO in the second round, 2 minutes and 49 seconds. Now, Jeremy Stephens was trying to brawl. He was trying to throw those haymakers, those hooks to KO Kelvin Kattar. But Kattar stuck to the basics, stuck to sharp striking, sharp boxing to counter Stephens like he does everybody else. That straight right hand of his is so perfect. Perfect form, so fast. He extends on it perfectly. And he hurt Jeremy Stephens when he hit him with it. And Stephens tried to go for some light kicks, but Kattar was on to him a bit. He was getting caught by them, but then he eventually started to move away and find out the range. Until eventually where that exchange happened, Kattar comes in with that big elbow, and Jeremy Stephens throws the punch. Now Kattar moved a bit to his right when he threw the elbow, and he got in close. So the punch of Stephens, of course, is going to have power, but it wasn't full power because it lands a little bit too close. It gets stuffed in a bit. But that's the range the elbow needed to land with full power. Pretty much put Stephens out. He's the first guy to knock out Jeremy Stephens with a headshot in the featherweight division. A phenomenal win, phenomenal performance, and one he really needs to ascend in this division. Coming off that Zabit loss, where he was doing really good in the third round, and then going to some of his other fights, the Ricardo Lamas fight knocking him out, and now knocking out Jeremy Stephens, another veteran in the featherweight division. I really want to see Kelvin Kattar in a main event. I want to see him fight for 5 rounds. Because I have a feeling this guy's a really strong fighter for 5 rounds. Far better than 3. He has a knockout ability for a 3-round fight. But in 5 rounds, I really wonder how good he would be. Because I have a feeling he's going to be amazing as a main event or a championship fighter. So who I would like to see for these two? It's very weird because I don't know where everybody's at. Yair Rodriguez is free. Zabit is free. Korean Zombie's free, Brian Ortega's free. I don't know who's gonna fight who, but since they're all open, the one I would like to see the most, if it can happen, I'll love to see Calvin Kattar versus Brian Ortega. That would be an amazing fight. Of course, that's probably not going to happen because they're so far in the rankings from each other. But if it's not that, Calvin Kattar versus Yair Rodriguez. They're pretty close in rank. They're both open. They're both young. And they both look very promising right now. And as for Jeremy Stephens, tough one for him, man. He has not won a fight since 2018, right? He is winless in his last 5 fights. That's tough. At this point, I think the UFC should use him for the prospects like they're kind of doing right now. They did it with Yair Rodriguez. They did it with Zabit. They did it with Calvin Kattar. They all fought Jeremy Stephens in his most recent fights. Carry that on. Let's do Sadiq Youssef. You know what I'm saying? Might as well at that point. You'll make a name off some of the prospects and carry on the future of this division. And then we go to Greg Hardy defeating Yorgan de Castro by decision. So it was a very weird fight. Nothing too much happened here. A lot of leg kicks from both of them. Yorgan was landing them early, and Yorgan was actually letting his hands go every time Greg Hardy did anything. But then what happened was, once Yorgan got his kick check, and I think it broke his foot or something like that, right? Yorgan completely stopped all of his offense. Didn't do anything. And Greg Hardy was just being active. He was just doing stuff, and that was enough for him to win the fight. A couple leg kicks, Greg Hardy extending with some of his long punches. You know, they're both very inexperienced in MMA, so it's a good experience for both fighters, especially for Greg Hardy getting another win in the UFC against a guy that he should be fighting. And just keep carrying that on with Greg Hardy until the UFC feels comfortable for him fighting better ranked opponents. I know a lot of people want to see him fight Tai Tuivasa. That should be the fight once they realize, okay, we can't feed him or give him these really inexperienced guys. You know, once they feel like he can challenge himself, then give him Tai Tuivasa. And then go to Anthony Pettis defeating Donald Cerrone by decision. Very close fight, very hard to score. I see a lot of people saying Donald Cerrone won by getting the second and the third round, I think. Well, initially, Pettis was boxing a lot. He wasn't really throwing many kicks, and he stuck in the southpaw position, and what he would do was he would move back and counter with the right hook whenever Cerrone tried to charge at him, right? It's a very similar thing that Justin Gaethje did to knock out Donald Cerrone. And he was catching Cerrone here and there, but he just didn't have the same kind of power to hurt him, right? And I'm very surprised because Cerrone's been getting hurt a lot in his most recent fights. But Cerrone's jab was landing a lot, and I think it probably broke Anthony Pettis' nose early in the fight. Moving backwards, moving forward, in place, that jab was just finding home, and Pettis really couldn't get his head away from it. And I really wish Pettis do more kicks because that's pretty much what won him the first fight. This one he was boxing a lot more. Countering, moving away. Cerrone, I feel like he should have been a little bit more aggressive with things. Not charge and chase, but like more output, more leg kicks, more push kicks, more takedown attempts, right? Be a little bit more aggressive because Pettis doesn't like that. And I understand it's not what Cerrone does, but it's going to be hard to defeat Pettis in that range game, you know, where you're going back and forth and no one's pushing the pace necessarily. It's going to be hard to beat a guy like Pettis at that. Fine fight between them two in the welterweight division. Who they should fight next? Anthony Pettis versus Jeff Neal. That'd be a really interesting fight. And as for Donald Cerrone, I don't know where he's going to go, lightweight or welterweight, but maybe him versus Damian Maia. And then we go to Alexey Oleynik defeating Fabricio Werdum by decision. It was a sloppy striking battle. Oleynik swinging those long arms of his, and they were just landing. Werdum was extremely hesitant, looked shy out there to let his hands go, let anything go, really. And it's not because the output of Oleynik and the pressure he put on Werdum was too much. Werdum has dealt with that before. You know, Cain Velasquez tried the same thing. And what did he do to Cain? Just jabbing at him. He let his hands go. Jab, 1-2, tie plum knee, separate, all that stuff. He didn't do any of that besides the tie plum. That's it. All he did was cover up from the punches, tie up, try to throw a knee here and there, but nothing was working. Oleynik was just letting the output fly out there, you know, and he was in really good shape. He weighed like 227, looked really slim out there, and I'm pretty sure that helped him with the cardio to extend this amount of output out there. And ultimately, I was thinking Werdum should have pulled guard in the fight because it wasn't going his way, right? In the second round, when he was getting the tie plum, pull guard. You know, it's not working out. If it's not working out and you're not able to let your hands go, pull guard and get to where you're comfortable. Because when it eventually did get to the ground in the third round, Werdum was dominating. He was getting the better positions, he was getting close submissions, and Oleynik really wasn't able to keep up. Right? He was just able to eventually get up away from the grappling and continue the striking. And I would think that Werdum was more technical. You know, historically looking at it, Oleynik is not a very technical striker. While Werdum has outstruck guys, or at least knocked down or hurt guys before, like Mark Hunt, Alistair Overeem, Cain Velasquez, with his striking. It might have been the layoff, it might be because he's not on PEDs, it might be because whatever it is, ring rust, who knows what it's because of. But that's nothing to take away from Oleynik, because Oleynik came out there not even looking to grapple at all, which is something he always looks to do. And with his change in physicality, being a bit smaller in this fight, making himself a little bit faster and better cardio, he probably knew something. He probably knew that Werdum couldn't handle the pressure and handle the aggression. And that's probably why he went to this whole bombardment with his hands, you know? So it was a good win for Oleynik. And who'd like to see him fight next? They can do Rozenstruik. You know, there's a lot of opening slots for Oleynik. And as for Werdum, I don't know, man. I honestly think Werdum should retire, to be honest. And if not, let's do a rematch with JDS. They're both pretty much over the hill at this point. It'll be a very interesting fight to revisit. And then we go to Carla Esparza defeating Michelle Waterson by split decision. It was a very weird scorecard. I think they gave Carla Esparza 30-27, but they gave Michelle Waterson 30-27 as well. That's crazy. When you have two 30-27s on each side, or one 30-27 for the losing fighter on the split decision, I don't know, man. Judges are seeing things very, very differently. It was a close fight, though. Esparza was landing with her hands. She was blitzing down Waterson. And Waterson did that thing, you know, she has that side kick defense, but when you get past it, she's pretty much open for anything. And it showed in this fight as well. It's just something she's just not fixing, you know? Not changing, because it becomes a habit. And you're under fire with all those punches getting thrown at you like Esparza throws. It's hard to adapt and change it up. But the thing I was really shocked at was Esparza let off a lot when she was finding success with her hands, landing the shots, but then moving away after like 5 or 6 of them, and allowed Waterson to get back into the fight. So that was really interesting, but Waterson seemed to be more powerful. She landed some really good kicks. It's really tough for who they should be fighting next, because Esparza already fought Claudia, and Claudia's fighting again. Nina Ansarov's going to be out for a while. Maybe you want a rematch? I mean, I don't like it for Carla, but Ioana's the only one really available that's higher ranked than her. But she can go back and fight maybe Tisha Torres or something. And as for Michelle Waterson, there is Marina Rodriguez, who is ranked right below her. And the rest of the fights I gotta catch up on. I saw a little bit here and there. Vicente Luque, I saw the TKO sequence with that left hook right to the eye. I mean, that eye will look terrible, man, after that punch. But I do remember the fight got slow really quick. It looked like they started gassing out in the first round, which was weird unless they were just fighting slower than how they started. And I was able to glance over Bryce Mitchell almost getting twisters, arm triangles, and just seemed like he was dominating Charles Rosa wherever it went. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if you did, make sure to thumbs up. If you enjoyed my content, make sure to subscribe, and leave in the comments below what you guys think about the entire card. What do you guys think should happen next? And there are more breakdowns to come soon. My Henry Cejudo vs Dominick Cruz breakdown is almost done. And as for the Tony Ferguson vs Justin Gaethje breakdown, that should come out a little bit later. So be looking for those. And again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys then.